What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars walks into a studio, expecting a friendly interview, only to find herself in the middle of the most brutal ambush daytime TV has ever seen? Today, we dive into the unforgettable moment Emma Watson faced off with Joy Behar on The View, and by the end, she left the studio and its host in stunned silence. This wasn't just another awkward interview. This was verbal warfare where every march hit harder than the last, and where one inmauled finally pushed Emma too far. Stick around. You're about to see why this clash became the most talked about moment in television history. The morning at the View studios started like any other. The crew bustled around adjusting lights, setting flowers on the desk, testing microphones. Joy Behar was in her dressing room, flipping through notes with that tight smile she wore when she was planning something sharp. Word had already circulated among the staff. She was going to go after Emma hard. Meanwhile, Emma Watson arrived in a tailored, eco-friendly suit that looked effortlessly chic. She shook hands with the crew, posed for a few backstage photos, and even gave a quick, warm smile to a cameraman. Ever the professional, she wore that trademark genuine grin, the same one that had charmed audiences in Harry Potter, Perks of Being a Wallflower, and beyond. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed her warmly when she walked on set. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the actress who's become a global activist, a UN Women Goodwill ambassador, and now best-selling author, Emma Watson. The crowd erupted in applause as Emma strode out, waving and flashing that grin. She took her seat at the iconic View table, nodding at each host. "Good to see you, Whoopi," she said, her voice clear and earnest, turning her words into music for the audience. "You too, Emma. You've done it all. Acting, activism, now another memoir. Tell us about it." Emma leaned in, her hands clasped. "Well, this book is about perseverance, vision, discipline. I wanted to share the lessons I learned from every stage of my life so people can see that nothing is impossible if you work hard enough." Sunny Hostin chimed in. "That's inspiring, Emma. What was the hardest part of your journey?" Emma's grin softened into something thoughtful. "Convincing myself I could do it. The pressure, the public scrutiny, everything. Those were my biggest obstacles. But I learned that you just have to keep going." For a few moments, everything was going smoothly. The audience hung on every word. Whoopi smiled encouragingly. Even Sarah Haynes nodded in admiration. But Joy Behar, she hadn't said a word. She just sat there, her red pen tapping the edge of her notes, eyes glinting with barely disguised disdain. And then she struck. "Emma," she said, leaning forward suddenly, "you've had quite the career, but don't you think it's fair to say your acting was always a little, let's call it, limited? I mean, you basically played the same character over and over, the earnest, bookish heroine who barely changes. Do you really think that's what you'd call talent?" The air in the studio changed instantly. A few gasps from the audience. Emma's smile froze for just a second before she let out a chuckle. "Well, Joy, I think my movies spoke for themselves. People loved them. They still do. Maybe it wasn't Shakespeare, but I made people happy." Joy wasn't done. She waved her pen at her. "Happy? Sure, but you can't say you were ever a great actor. And let's be honest here, that earnestness of yours, it was part of the joke half the time. Don't you think your whole career was more about image than skill? A young star becomes a UN ambassador because of a perfect public image? That's not talent, Emma. That's marketing." Emma's jaw tightened slightly. "Maybe you're right, Joy. Maybe it was marketing, but people showed up anyway and they still watch." Joy smirked, clearly pleased with herself. "Of course they did. People love explosions and catchphrases. But then you became a political activist. Let me ask you this. Do you really think you'd have been taken seriously if you weren't already famous? Or did you just coast on your movie star fame to win hearts and minds?" Whoopi tried to cut in. "Joy, let's keep it about the book for now." But Joy raised a hand and kept going. No, Whoopi, this is a fair question. Emma, you spent years pretending to be a hero on screen and then thought you could lecture the world on feminism. The movement was a mess when you started. You think being in movies prepared you for that? Or did you just don another role, this time activist? Emma's knuckles whitened on the table, but she still kept her voice even, calm. "Joy, I did what I could for the movement. Nobody could fix everything overnight. We made progress. We reformed the way people talk about gender, invested in equality in film. Joy cut her off. Oh, please. Equality in film. You drove around in designer clothes and lived in a mansion with a carbon footprint bigger than a small country. You talk about discipline and vision, but what about hypocrisy? What about responsibility? You think that book of yours makes up for everything? For a long moment, Emma just stared at her, that famous piercing gaze boring into hers. The audience was silent, tension thick in the air. Joy, she finally said, her voice low but firm. I came here to talk about my book, to inspire people, but it seems you're more interested in tearing me down. That's fine, I can take it. I've faced bigger challenges than you. But Joy just leaned back, crossed her arms, and smiled smugly. But we'll see how long you can keep your cool once we talk about your family next, won't we? The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The audience audibly gasped. Even Whoopi's eyes widened as Emma's smile finally fully vanished. And that's when everyone knew things were about to get much, much worse. She came to promote a memoir. She came to pick a fight. And when Joy Behar crossed the line from politics to personal, Emma Watson didn't just defend herself. She unleashed decades of frustration in one of the most dramatic moments in talk show history. This wasn't just uncomfortable. This was combustible. For a brief moment, everything froze. The audience, the co-hosts, even the cameras seemed to hold their breath as Joy Behar's words echoed through the studio. We'll see how long you can keep your cool once we talk about your family next, won't we? Emma's expression changed in a way no one had ever seen on television before. For gone was the practiced Hollywood smile, the calm activist's composure. What replaced it was something colder, heavier. A warning forged from years of dealing with press, betrayal, scandal, and shame. She didn't speak right away in that silence. It was terrifying. Joy, on the other hand, seemed to think she had the upper hand. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk like a cat about to play with its prey. Let's talk about character, Emma. The book's full of advice, discipline, honor, family values. But what about your own history? The scandals, the headlines. How can someone who couldn't keep her own household together talk to the American public about discipline? Emma's hands were now clasped tightly in front of her, her knuckles white, but her voice remained calm, barely. Joy, I don't think you want to go down that path. Joy didn't flinch. Why not? You brought your personal story into the book. You used your family to sell copies, so it's fair game, right? That's how this works. Activist, or should I say, former child star turned self-help guru. The sarcasm in her voice was razor sharp. Emma let out a slow exhale. My family is off limits, she said quietly. This interview was supposed to be about the ideas in my book, not a character assassination in prime time. Joyce smirked and leaned back. Oh, come on, Emma. You've made a career out of pretending to be the hero, the leader, the inspiration. This is just another act, the big, strong woman who overcame adversity. But when it comes to your past, your real past, you get awfully uncomfortable. Why is that? Sarah Haynes and Sunny Host exchanged nervous glances. Whoopi visibly tensed. The audience had shifted from intrigued to unsettled. Emma's voice dropped an octave. I've admitted my mistakes. I've taken accountability. Publicly, repeatedly. Have you, Joy? Joy's eyes narrowed. Don't turn this around on me. I'm not the one preaching about personal growth while using my fame to bulldoze my way through activism and life. Emma chuckled bitterly. You think everything I've done was because of fame? You think it's easy to move from being a child actress to a respected activist, speak a different language, win the highest awards in film, break into a serious movement when no one wanted me, then get appointed to represent the world's largest governing body? You think that's all just because of a few movie posters? Joy crossed her arms. I think you got lucky. I think your image and charm gave you a gimmick. And I think people were too busy cheering for the girl from Harry Potter to notice you had no real qualifications to lead a movement. That did it. Emma slowly rose from her seat, towering over the table. Her voice was calm, but it was the calm of an approaching storm. Joy, you've been insulting my work, my integrity, my image, and now my family. You say you're holding people accountable, but what you're really doing is throwing mud and hoping something sticks. That's not journalism, that's showboating. Joy stood too. She wasn't going to be talked down to. Not by anyone. It's called asking the hard questions, Emma. Maybe if more people had challenged you instead of worshiping you, the movement wouldn't have been left in shambles. I gave everything I had to that cause, she snapped. I fought to fix a broken system, and I did it while being mocked for every word I spoke, every step I took. And now I come here not to sell myself, but to share what I've learned. And what do I get? You mocking my voice, mocking my life. Oh, please, Joyce shot back. You had everything handed to you the moment you became a celebrity. You played a girl who barely knew how to use magic, and somehow that made you a genius. You think spouting one-liners and posing for the camera makes you wise? Emma took a step closer, her voice a whisper now, but sharp as steel. You're not doing this to inform the public. You're doing it because you enjoy it. You enjoy tearing people down. You invite guests on this show not to listen, but to trap them. You hide behind your desk and your cords and pretend to be a journalist, but you're not. You're a performer and not a very good one. Gasps filled the studio. The audience, previously tense, now shifted into awe. They were witnessing something raw, unscripted, real. Joy's face flushed. You think you can walk in here and insult me on my own show? Get out! Emma stared her down with pleasure. She pulled off her mic, dropped it on the table, and turned toward the exit. But halfway there, she stopped. Without turning back, she said, I've faced predators, dictators, and political sharks, but nothing is more toxic than a fake journalist pretending she's doing the world a service by tearing others apart. Good luck living with that, Joy. And then she walked off, straight-backed, unapologetic, and silent. The cameras kept rolling. The studio was frozen. Even Joy had nothing left to say. Emma had walked out, but the battle wasn't over. Behind the cameras, in the stunned silence that followed, tempers flared and truths that had simmered beneath the surface for years erupted in front of millions. When the cameras kept rolling, they captured not just the aftermath, but the reckoning. The doors to the set swung shut behind Emma. But the echo of her final words, nothing is more toxic than a fake journalist pretending she's helping the world by tearing others apart, still hung in the studio air for a long, tense moment. Joyce stood there clutching her notes so tightly, the papers crumpled in her fists. Her cheeks were scarlet. Her chest rose and fell in short, angry breaths. Whoopee. Ever the peacemonger finally broke the silence. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, folks. We'll be right back after this. But the cameras didn't cut yet. They lingered, capturing every awkward glance and whispered exchange as the audience slowly began to clap. At first uncertainly, then louder, clearly in support of Emma. Joyce spun around, glaring at the audience like a queen betrayed. Oh, you think this is funny? She barked, her voice sharp, brittle. You're clapping for her? After she just walked out like a petulant child because she couldn't handle some real questions. The audience quieted, but a few scattered boos echoed through the studio. One man near the front shouted, At least she stood up to you. Joy's jaw dropped, her face darkening even further. Get him out, she snapped at a nearby usher. The man was escorted out of the studio as the rest of the audience looked on, appalled. Meanwhile, in the hallway backstage, Emma stood just beyond view of the cameras, straightening her jacket and pacing like a caged lioness. Her publicist and a pair of producers hovered nervously, trying to calm her down. Emma, let's just go. It's done. You made your point. No, Emma said firmly, her voice low and dangerous. She made this personal. She insulted my family, my work, my voice, my activism. And then she dares to call that journalism. No, that's bullying, and no one calls her out. Not anymore. Back in the studio, Whoopi tried to regain control. Joy, that got heated. Let's cool it down and move on, okay? But Joy wasn't listening. She stood up and jabbed her finger at the still rolling cameras. You all saw what happened. She couldn't answer a single question without getting defensive. She's a coward, and I don't care how many movies she's made or how many causes she's championed. She's a fraud. The words venomous and loud carried all the way down the hall. Emma stopped pacing. Slowly, she turned back toward the set, her expression like granite. Her publicist put a hand on her chest. "Emma, please, just let it go." She brushed her off and strode back toward the stage. "No, not yet." The studio doors swung open again, and there she was, filling the doorway, her imposing figure casting a shadow that silenced the entire room. The audience gasped. Even Joy froze. She walked back to the table, picked up the microphone she'd thrown down earlier, and clipped it back onto her lapel with deliberate calm. "You want to finish this, Joy?" "Fine. Let's finish it right now." Joy blinked, clearly taken aback, but unwilling to back down. "Oh, now you want to talk? Now that you've had a chance to come up with some canned speech?" Emma shook her head. "No speech, just facts." She turned to face the cameras directly, her eyes steely and unflinching. "You say my work is wrong, my activism. Do you have any idea what it's like to move from being a child star to a serious leader in a world where no one takes you seriously? Where they laugh at every cause you champion? I made that voice work for me. I built a career on it, not despite it, because of it. And you mock that?" The audience burst into applause, but Emma raised a hand for silence. "You say an actress can't be an activist? Then why do millions of people around the world know my campaigns? Why do they still quote my speeches decades later? You call it luck, I call it work." She stepped closer to Joy now, her towering presence nearly casting her into shadow. "And you say I became a UN ambassador because of my fame? Maybe. Maybe fame opened the door, but I walked through it. I did not sit here sniping at other people. I got in the arena and took the hits and kept going. That's more than you've ever done." Joy's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. Emma leaned in, her voice dropping to a low growl. "You don't invite guests here to talk, Joy. You invite them to tear them down, to score points, to feed your ego. But let me tell you something, no amount of smugness can hide the fact that you've spent your entire career throwing stones at people who dared to build something while you sat here safe on your little throne." The studio was utterly silent now. The other hosts looked as if they were holding their breath. Joy finally found her voice, though it cracked slightly when she spoke. You don't get to talk to me like that." Emma straightened, giving her one final piercing look. "And you don't get to talk to anyone like you talk to me today, not anymore." She unclipped the microphone again and set it gently on the table. "We're done here." And this time, when she walked out, no one dared stop her. The audience erupted into thunderous applause as Emma disappeared through the door for the final time. Even a few of the other hosts joined in, clapping softly, though they avoided Joy's gaze. Joy stood at the table, motionless, her eyes fixed on the floor. The cameras caught her face as she finally whispered almost to herself, "Good riddance." But even she didn't sound convinced. The cameras kept rolling long after Emma left the stage. The audience buzzed, Joy simmered, and the studio had become a battlefield littered with bruised egos and unforgettable words. But the storm wasn't over yet, because Emma had one more surprise in store before the credits rolled. The door to the set swung closed behind Emma, the heavy sound echoing through the studio like a gavel dropping at the end of a trial. For a beat, no one moved. The applause from the audience faded into an uneasy silence as the weight of what had just happened settled in the air. Joy sat at the table, her chest still heaving from the confrontation. Her notes, now a crumpled mess, lay scattered across the table, a physical reminder of the battle she had just fought, and in many eyes lost. Whoopi finally spoke, her voice low and almost weary. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break, everyone. We'll be right back." But before the cameras cut to commercial, a lone voice in the audience called out, "You owe her an apology." The words hung in the air, sharp and impossible to ignore. Joy's head snapped toward the audience, her lips curling into a bitter sneer. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice cracking with fury. "This is my show. I asked the questions. She couldn't handle a few facts. That's not my fault." But the audience wasn't buying it anymore. A low murmur began to spread through the crowd. Words like "out of line," "too far," and even "bully" floated toward the stage. Some people even stood, gathering their coats, clearly unwilling to stay for what was shaping up to be an ugly postscript. The other hosts, Whoopi, Sunny, and Sarah, tried desperately to smooth things over. We all got a little heated. Let's all just move on. It's live TV, folks. These things happen. But Joy wasn't done. She shot to her feet, pointing a trembling finger toward the audience. She came here thinking she could coast on her fame and charm. And when someone finally held her accountable, she ran. That's what cowards do. You all saw it. The audience booed. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, like a wave building and crashing over her words. Joy froze, her cheeks flaming red under the studio lights as the sound washed over her. Then, just as the director signaled for the cameras to cut, there was a commotion at the back of the studio. The doors burst open again, and Emma returned. The audience gasped, then erupted into applause. This time, Emma wasn't smiling. Her jaw tight, her eyes hard as steel, she strode straight to the center of the stage, ignoring the producers who scrambled after her. Joy sputtered, "What are you doing back here? You had your tantrum. Now get out." Emma stopped dead in her tracks, turned toward her, and in a voice so calm it was terrifying, said, "I came back to finish what I started." The audience fell into a hush. You think you can talk to people however you want, insult their families, their voices, their work, and then hide behind the excuse of being a journalist. No, Joy, that's not journalism. That's cruelty. And everyone here saw it. Joy opened her mouth, but Emma cut her off with a raised hand. "You mocked my activism. You mocked my voice. You mocked the work it took to get here. Do you have any idea what it's like to move from a child star to an activist, dreaming of something bigger? Do you have any idea what it's like to work on a cause until you feel you're bleeding? To fight for every word you speak for a movement? To build something from nothing? No, you don't. You sit here comfortable and throw stones at people who dared to climb out of the pit you're still sitting in." The audience erupted into applause so loud it drowned out Joy's attempt to respond. Emma took another step toward her. "You called me a coward. You called me a failure. You know what I see when I look at you, Joy? Someone who spent her entire life tearing people down because she was too afraid to build something herself. You are everything wrong with the media, and I'm not going to let you get away with it anymore." Joy's lips trembled as she tried to keep her composure. "You think you can come on my show and lecture me? You think you're better than me?" Emma smiled, a smile without warmth. "No, I know I am because at least I tried." She turned to the audience. "This is your hero?" she asked, gesturing at Joy. "This is who you let speak for you. Someone who thinks strength is measured in sarcasm and success in how many people she can humiliate." The audience roared in approval. Emma straightened her jacket, then looked down at Joy one last time. "You want me out? Fine. But remember this, you didn't kick me off this stage. You just proved you don't deserve to sit on it." With that, she walked off for the final time, her back straight, her head high. The audience leapt to their feet, clapping and cheering as she disappeared behind the curtains. Joy stood frozen at the table, her hands shaking, her face pale. When the cameras finally cut, Whoopi leaned over and whispered just loud enough for the audience to hear, "Maybe next time, Joy, pick on someone your own size." The audience gasped again, and then laughter. Nervous, awkward, but real. As the lights dimmed and the credits rolled, the story was already being written. Emma's walk-off would dominate the headlines for weeks, while Joy would spend the next days defending herself in a losing PR battle. If you thought this was explosive, just wait to see what happened when Emma posted her response on social media later that night. But what do you think? Was Emma right to stand up to Joy, or did she go too far? Tell us in the comments below.